I got people signing to me. And I know I sound different when I open my mouth, but people start signing to me, and it bothers me because I'm not signing to them, so why are they signing to me? So it's a very interesting philosophical question for me, and so depending on my mood that day, I kindly explain that I don't sound, and sometimes I actually say, actually, I don't really understand what you're saying. I do know a few signs that is true, but that's all I know. So, with that said, I think that this is an interesting conversation to be had about staff at organizations like ChrisTiana said. You know, what is your staff made up of? Who is representative of the community? Anything else you want to add?
I'm just going to, can I add one thing? I just noticed on one of the news, one of the radio stations, they were advertising that they were doing American Sign Language for one of the plays. And I kind of thought about you, Elizabeth, you don't do signing. I don't do Braille. It's, everybody assumes that there's certain, if you have a disability, that you're all in the same.
Right, exactly. I remember when I was in graduate school, and a friend of mine was telling me that he went home to tell his parents that he met this really cool woman who happened to be deaf, and the parents said, "Does she know Braille?" I mean, just that kind of thing. So very interesting. I think we have one question so far that's coming from the audience.
This is the first of 3 questions, but I'll just go ahead and ask the first one first. This question asks, what is your favorite accessibility arts venue in the area and who's doing it well? And I would like to add a piece to that too. What indicators in a venue, this is coming from a venue's point of view, are there that make you feel like at home? What things do we do well to allow access into the theater or to anything?
I'd like to answer that. Oh, go ahead, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a very similar question to what I was going to ask. Or that what the ideal cultural experience look like for you. So along the same line with that. You know, when you go into a venue and it's working well and it's going, what does that look like? What does that feel like when it's the ideal cultural experience for you? Go ahead, Camille.
Okay, well, I just want to thank Kelsey Donahue for being here from the Seattle Art Museum, because what they have done for the Be On Site program has been really terrific, and they've had lots of people come and observe what we do and as well to what they do there. The docents are describing art to blind and low vision people. They make accommodations if you take access, they'll actually meet you outside the door to help you in, or they wait at the front door for you so you're not afraid to get in, and they'll walk you to the room. We all meet together, and then we all go as a group, and docents work with us as far as making sure we have a sighted guide, and they know the language, like it's not over here or over there. It's like they describe it so we can actually understand. So I have to thank Kelsey for what they've done at the Seattle Art Museum, and it's been terrific. Also, the downtown library at Cleo and CJ are here from the Library Equal Access Program, and we started the book group there, and they've accommodated our needs totally. We all sit in a group, we all talk about the same book we've all listened to, and they make sure we get to get access home or taxi home, or they walk us across the street and we go and have our lunch together as a group. So there's 2 places I've really found that have been really accommodating our needs. It's been a wonderful experience.
My favorite art venue has great parking and lots of bathrooms that are very close to the parking. It may sound silly, but one of the key tenets in the ADA regulations do involve access to restrooms. And so those are my 2 favorites. The other key thing for me personally to feel safe are handrails. So So my favorite venues have handrails and information, and something to which I referred to earlier, the ability to allow me to choose where I want to sit, and I'm not just pegged into one particular place. Technically, again, the ADA regulations state that all price points should be available and accessible as needed, and based on age of venues, it might not necessarily happen, but that would be great for me.
I was sitting here trying to think of like a specific venue, and it's not necessarily that there's specific venues that's been accessible, but that there's been specific programming or organizers or curators or folks who have made it more accessible. And you can kind of tell based on who is overseeing an event within one space, because the lighting will be different. They may or may not use strobe lights. There's just little things like that you can tell that someone thought about, folks with developmental, cognitive, and psychiatric disability. And what's interesting, especially because we're at a four-culture event, I think one of the most accessible art installations I went to was actually earlier this month at the TK Artist Lofts in one of their artistic spaces, and how they curated it was looking not only to the lighting and making sure that there was not as much ambient noise, but also to have essentially like a stimming table for folks like me waiting for the show to start. There was collage there, and Play-Doh, and things like that. There was either pillows instead of the floor, or chairs, or open space for wheelchairs. And as one of the people who wanted to perform, they made sure to check in with me, not only whether or not I had all the tools I needed to perform, but whether or not I had the spoons to go at my place on the set list, and was open to changing the set list in case I was becoming fatigued or overstimulated. So for me, that was extremely accessible, and it was a great space. What I had originally prepared for this one question was just, I think it's very important in arts, when you're talking about accessibility, to also think about this intersectionally. Like, you're gonna hear me say intersectionality a lot, and cultural humility. And so, think about safety. Not just real safety, but perceived safety. And safety from all the way from whether or not someone feels safe to buy a ticket and even enter into your space, to whether someone feels safe asking for help finding their seat, whether someone feels safe buying wine in intermission, whether someone feels safe waiting for an Uber outside without getting approached or accosted. These are all things around safety, and especially things like bathrooms, coat check, all these different places where you have to interact with people. Really think about safety, both real and perceived, and find ways to address those issues if you find places for improvement in that.
Okay. Thank you. I think for me, I don't think I've yet found the right venue as far as accessibility goes, because not all provide sign language interpreters. So that means I can't go to any event anywhere at any time. Like, other people have to follow a schedule that is the same. So I have to follow other people's, whatever they perceive as a good time for deaf people to go, I have to follow that. It would be nice if I could just show up and have the interpreters ready, or even captioning ready. And I could just turn them on, sure, no problem, without any apologies or resistance from the venue itself. And also the price point, I think they can budget in access, for interpreters or captioning, etc. And also installing ramps and handrails to make sure that their spaces are accessible. If they do that in the beginning, they don't have to think about it later when it comes up, right? They don't have to, it's not going to be an aftermath type of thing. Oh, sorry, we'll be sure to do it next time. Or sorry, we don't have the budget. Of course, that's frustrating. And I also then have to make sure I have the time to explain to upper management or the person who is planning this event to say, well, if you look at the budget costs, etc., it's something that they have to learn the vocabulary, the numbers, etc. They have to build this into their budget. That way, you then know how to ask them, and you can have that kind of dialogue with them. I think it would be nice to just not have to make that type of a decision every day, right? Just kind of focus on the experience of the art and the culture that's happening.
I want to add the piece about the budget is so important, I think. If all of this was sort of subsumed by the budget, if you just plan for accessibility within your budget, then you should go Bruno. But I think that funders are slowly starting to come around to the idea that it would be good to pay for these things, pay for accessibility. So I think we still have some work to do when it comes to educating donors and patrons of the arts about that sort of thing. Also, I want to make the point that accessibility doesn't just begin once you walk in the door, it happens before that. So take for example, someone who's blind and living by themselves, or someone who's low income. How are they going to get from point A to point B? How are they going to get from their home to the theater? There has to be a way of helping them get transport, for example. So thinking about accessibility outside the door is also important.
I would also just add, I also want to add to, and this is the consultant in me coming out, right? So I would say that if you're, I would argue, I would empathetically, directly argue with you that if you have concerns around whether or not you have budget item for accessibility, that is saying a lot about the culture of your organization. It is showing a lot about how your organization views people with disabilities, and to the extent that they are prioritized in your strategic or business plan, and not everywhere. It would be something that, as a consultant, I would come in and perhaps see to what extent that is pervasive, and work on cultural humility models so that people can see accessibility as an intrinsic part of your organization and the arts, and not something that has to be accommodated on the back end. And that sort of unconscious, definitely likely unconscious implicit bias, not intentional, not saying that you're waking up every day saying like, ooh, how can I keep the disabled people out of my space today, but that it's something that's happening. And I would just argue, if you're sitting here fretting, oh my goodness, but do we have the money to make this more accessible? I would ask yourself to find the core why of that concern.
I think this is a workshop in and of itself. This is a very important topic, and I think one that is burning and moving my mind. So, I'm going to switch tack just a little bit. Next question, I think, is an important one, kind of related to all this. Language and how we refer to ourselves is important. Some people are unsure what to say or how to refer to disabilities. How do you refer to yourself when it comes to your disability, and what do people get wrong about your disability? Let's start with Lara this time.
This is actually a little bit of a hard one for me, because I'm still, even though this has been going on for 10 years for me personally, I still don't necessarily know I don't usually like labels. I tend to be very self-deprecating because I don't want people to feel at ease. I carry a weapon, I carry a stick, I'm in this machine sometimes that people aren't familiar with, and I don't, and when I was in the scooter, I had a young child, so it was important to me to make sure everybody felt comfortable, and I'm also very tall, and so it was important to me to make people feel at ease. So I personally am not necessarily the best person to talk to about this right now, but I do understand that, again, these tools that make movement in our lives easier for us may be perceived differently to others.
Camille, my turn.
Well, a lot of people come up to me and they say, oh, are you training this dog for some blind person? And I'll say, I am the person who's blind. And they're like, no, you're not. You don't look blind. And I go, what does blind look like? So I think it's interesting because I prefer not, I don't mind saying I'm blind. I have no problem with that. I used to say I was visually challenged, and I still am visually challenged, but now I'm actually with less sight, so I am blind. And you know, and then people get really uncomfortable. I'll go to a store and I'll ask them a question, and then I'll say, are you standing in front of me? And they'll look at me and go, yes. And I'll say, well, okay, because I can't see. So, I mean, I try really hard not to make it hard on people, though. I kind of really think it's important for people to know. So when they think I'm blind and find out I'm blind, when they find out I'm blind, I tell them what my needs are. I have no problem telling people what they can do to help me so that I'm more comfortable in the space I'm in. So I have no problem with that. And I think Egan's a dead giveaway. Although every time I go to a restaurant with my husband or my family, they'll go, is that a working dog? I go, yeah, this is a real one.
Do people tend to talk louder to you when they find out you're blind?
Oh, totally. And they talk to my husband. They ask my husband a question. Would you like a Braille menu? Or they'll say something like that, and I'll say, no, I don't, thank you. Or they'll hand me a menu, and I'll say, here, I don't really need it, but I'm a good eater. I try really hard to help people out. And people who know me when I go to a restaurant or somewhere in our neighborhood, they're really great. They'll say the water's right in front of you, or you know, they'll make comments to help me. But most people don't get it until they notice that I eat pretty good. I've learned how to eat with a knife and a fork, and and still have things come off my plate. But I think I do pretty well as being a blind person. I'm getting it.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were going to go ChrisTiana. I do think it's important to study different disability terms. That's important just to have in your head, and not label other people, let them label themselves. So for example, there are some times, like when I go to the airport, okay, and so I go and I check in, and they say, oh, you're a deaf person, and without my knowledge, they say that I'm disabled on my ticket, and then there's going to be another person on the other side, and they have a wheelchair, and they try to make, and it's like, hey, you know, there are some deaf people with other disabilities that do use wheelchairs, but again, they never ask me if I want it or not. They could check in and see if I want a wheelchair or not, and then I can answer, no, I can walk myself. So something else, another situation, going into a store, again, let me identify myself with a certain term of vocabulary and take out that attitude or a certain stereotype that you might carry. Because every person that comes up to me, I'm a person who signs. When I start signing with them, they say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. There's so much pity. They feel helpless because they don't know sign. They want to communicate with me, and that's important to throw that out and just see how they can communicate with me in that moment. We can text, we can write back and forth, etc. Instead, you know, I want them to see me as an equal."
Yeah, I think it's United Airlines is the one that does the wheelchairs. Right? Yes, United Airlines. This happens to around my friends when they go flying, friends who are deaf, and United Airlines, they come out as they're walking out with a wheelchair. It's pretty funny, they send a text of themselves sitting in the wheelchair. I wanted to point out, here are some news and, yeah, oh, yes, go ahead.
Okay, so I think what I want to preface this with is that you're hearing me talk a lot about cognitive, developmental, and psychiatric disability. And I actually have co-occurring disabilities. So I have chronic disabilities that affect the way that I move about in the world, my body. I have physical disabilities that you can't really see. Today's a good day and I don't have my cane. But what has affected my life the most were those developmental, cognitive, and psychiatric disabilities. What I think is important in saying that is contextual. And so contextual in this idea that I was still trying to grapple when I was thinking about this question. So I might say, I'm autistic, I'm an autistic person, but I'm not gonna say I'm schizoaffective. I don't know why. I might say I live with schizoaffective disorder. You know, I don't call myself DID, you know, which is I just forget.
But the ID's done.
It's a dissociative, is what it was, dissociative identity disorder. I'm not gonna say like, I'm a dissociative. I just say, I live with dissociative identity disorder. And I was asking my husband, we met at a peer counselor conference for people with disabilities, and I asked, do you consider yourself an epileptic or that you live with epilepsy? And he said, it depends on the day. And we had this conversation around like, perhaps the change is based on our relationship with it. And so in like a 10-second synopsis, there are two different models of disability, the medical and social model of disability. And essentially the medical model says that the person is disabled and the world accommodates them, and the social model of disability says disability is something that happens to the person and society is inaccessible to them. And I think it's in that relationship of the social model that I make that choice day to day. So I don't know if it's psychosocial for me. I don't know if it's socio-political. I don't know if it's because I feel like, especially as a Black femme-presenting person, people would hold that I'm autistic or that I have a learning disability more than they would hold that I'm schizoaffective or that I have dissociative identity disorder. But I do think it's important to ask and be in a what I call cultural consent conversation, which means you can ask them the question, but you also have to allow them to consent to have a conversation about their culture and identity with you. And if they choose not to, you have to respect that. And I think that would be the best thing, but the biggest thing that people get wrong about me is, number one, yes, Black autistic people exist. Number two, I can be schizoaffective and no, I'm not gonna hurt you. Sybil is wrong, so is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And like, none of it is true. So not really. And so I would just say also check your bias. Check how much your bias is based in sensationalized movies. We have not done a very good job of not showing stereotypes, especially of cognitive, developmental, and especially psychiatric disability. But don't assume, but please do check your bias. And I guess finally, just know that body language is about 90% of your communication. So it's not about saying the right things. I can tell when people shirk away. I can tell if I'm dysregulated, or if I just slip up and have a response to external stimuli, how people act. And I'll just end with this. There are a lot of other things that are happening in this world with folks like myself. And there's a lot of people who see me talk and they say, wow, but you must be one of the good ones. Also, don't assume people's backgrounds. I spent over 7 years of my life in involuntary psychiatric treatment, 3 of those being in an asylum, 5 of those being in a social program that conditioned me into being able to do this. So just because of that, I just want to let you know. I say that because also don't assume background. So just because you hear that, don't assume that someone is one of the good ones or they're so high functioning or they're well performing. I think that's the biggest thing people get wrong about all people with psychiatric disability.
Thank you. I think that the maybe disability, the invisible, for example, my disability, you will never know that I was deaf until I open my mouth. I can't tell you how many times people steer the conversation through my deafness. And I don't necessarily want to talk about it all the time. So like ChrisTiana was saying, it just depends on the day. It depends on how I'm feeling, if I feel like showing. But I personally don't identify as someone with disability first. I am a professional woman, I'm a mother, I am a public health professional, I'm a writer, I'm competing triathlons. No, there's so much more to me than just my deafness. So it's important to meet the person where they're at. So take a look at this screen here and just get some ideas of how you might think about referring to someone. And this is not an exhaustive list. Everyone has their own way of calling themselves certain terms. So this is not meant to be the all and all. So I want to switch to Daniela. She has a question from the audience.
Okay, so this question says, having representation in a space is incredibly important to increasing equity in an organization. But organizations can't hire diverse populations if not everyone feels they have access to even apply. In your experience, what are some factors or strategies you have encountered that made you feel actually welcome to apply for a job or experience?
Right.
I was looking at
All of you.
You wrote her statistic.
I'm still thinking.
Okay, so I would say there's two things going on in the situation. Number one, there are a lot of coded language that I can speak for myself and the folks that I've worked with, especially in Disabilities Commission and my constituents. There's a lot of coded language that make people go away. Like, for example, I don't know if you know of a lot of people across the spectrum of like cognitive, developmental, neurological, psychiatric. A lot of us can't get driver's licenses because there are certain parts of our disability that prevents us from getting driver's licenses. So if you have as a requirement that someone needs to have a driver's license, and you read the job duties, and you don't actually need one, but it's for whatever reason you have, then that's going to be the number one red flag. You also have to remember that a lot of folks come from this sort of imposter syndrome. So they're already, a lot of folks who come from sort of social oppression already feel they're at a lack. And so I would say that having specific programs and initiatives that reach out to people that you need is important. I know that a lot of you are probably 501c3s and can't do political advocacy, but I will say that, Washington State, for example, does have a state law against affirmative action that's being discussed in the state legislature right now. I mean, if you feel that you would need something like that, find a way in your free time or through a partnership with a non-501c3 to do that. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, it also might come down to what is the narrative of your organization. What is your organizational narrative putting out to the community? What is the social impact of what you have, not just what you're doing, but what you have done? Because if you're also not looking at it, not just how do we be competent in helping bring folks into the organization, but also what is it about us that we can change or innovate or transform so that we can not just attract people like flies to honey, but that is a space that people would like to come to. I think those would be your best options for bringing those sort of people in. You need to hire a consultant.
Any other comments?
I would just like to acknowledge that having worked at nonprofits in the past, I know exactly just how much free time you have every day, and that you're bored, and you need something else for your list of to-do lists. It's not tricky. It's really a tricky thing, and hopefully at some point there will be a little bit of time to make the effort to go out and try and find a new candidate pool, because it's easy if a resume lands on your desk and they're qualified. Task item done. And so I appreciate the time limitations and the small budgets. But to ChrisTiana's point, if it's important to the organization, you'll find a way. And it shows. It shows in the programming. It shows in the number of people that will come and find out about your events. And I think in the end of the day, the institution will be a stronger institution.
I've been thinking about this. Well, I would say if you do hire somebody that would be in the organization, be sure to understand their needs, because I've been on boards before where everybody got all the paperwork information, and that's something that I can't read. So when I was low vision, it would be fine print, and I'd have to ask for it in large print. So I would say if you do hire somebody with, or whatever their needs are, accommodate them, so that they feel like they're welcome, and they can also go out in the public and invite other people with special needs.
This is actually kind of related to this last topic that we had. So again, if you don't consider people with disabilities as your educators, we are not your teachers, okay? When you do want to hire someone else, do your own homework. Don't assume they're ready. You can hire a consultant, other people as well, and discuss with them and see what are the right phraseology, the appropriate definitions that you want to include within your organization with. So right, you want people of color to come to your organization, but why? Do you want to actually better your organization, or do you just want their money? Do you want to satisfy the buzzword of diversity? You really have to consider your intention behind it at first. So don't just hire someone and then put all of the work on their shoulders because they happen to be a member of that community. It's not fair to that person. They just want to do their job. They don't want to focus on their race, gender, etc., anything like that, including disability status. So again, it does depend on the organization. Because my organization is called Deaf Spotlight, and it is a deaf-centered organization. It focuses on sign language, its culture, and we are thinking about making accessible events. And so we're talking about the venues. It's important to have these discussions way ahead of time to make sure that we also secure deaf blind interpreters for other members of our communities without them requesting it necessarily. So we just have the interpreters ready in case the need does come up. So then if a deaf blind person does show up, we have that access for them. So again, we want to consider everything in beforehand to just make sure that we've covered all of our bases. And of course, right in the middle, right in the thick of the planning process, we have to consider that first, and then it will come with the programming.
First of all, excellent presentation. What advice would you give to arts educators working with children and teens? What do you wish would have been different when you were young and first discovering the arts?
You want to tack it up on
I'm going to start that. Okay. Well, for me, as a young person going to activities, of course, I would love to have audio description then. This is so new, and it's happening more and more. I would like not to be limited to just one play, if it's a play, or I would like to have more accessibility. As a child, though, nobody accommodated me when I was in school, so I think that for me, I think now there is much more awareness. It's getting a lot better. I would like to just see it continuing so that nobody feels left out. I really feel that as a young person going through visual problems, even my peers did not get what I was dealing with. I really felt that it's nobody wants to feel so different. So I think I would like to just see more doors open for people with all kinds of disabilities. And I'd love to see when you go into a theater, there would be someone in a wheelchair or someone with signs and closed caption. I mean, all of that, audio description. I'd like to see it all.
The more the arts are accessible to everybody, I think that will help us all grow up and expand our minds. My son, in particular, for example, has never known anything different. I'm his mom. I'm not a disabled person. I'm not a this. I'm not a that. We've lived together in the same house, and so if these venues provide access to everybody, then again, it's the proximity comment. I think that will help these kids recognize that we're all the same. We are all unequal. With the equality versus equity, that it truly is an equitable society, and that each institution can achieve that one step at a time.
This is a hard question, because I keep trying to think about how to phrase it, but, you know, just for context, I grew up from the mid-90s to early aughts, and so that's like post-racial society myth, pre-Obama time, right? So I think there's like, post-racial society myth, pre-Obama era. So what's difficult about answering the question is that it really was an intersectional issue for me. Not only was I disabled and I was a Black child, which especially autistic, back with a single young mom with state insurance that didn't cover ABA board certified specialists to give me the help that I needed, who was going through all of these different sort of things, and she was also poor. So there was a lot of those sort of arts things that I only experienced if it was like part of a field trip at school. And even then, what I would say I really wish I had as a kid was representation. And not just representation of people who had disabilities, but people like me who had disabilities who were in a positive way. Because it was already hard enough as a Black girl to find representation of me that wasn't either, what do I say, like police, poverty, or pills. Like those are really like the three themes of people who look like me in all arts. Maybe I might see something without some of that, like dream girls, but still there's poverty and pills in that too. You know, so there's Porgy and Bess, but then there's all of that going on. There's a lot of this sort of stuff. So I would love to see like a Black schizoaffective woman like doing the dang thing, going out, living their life without ending up like with some sort of like breakdown or some sort of dramatic thing. And that might mean bringing in more screenwriters or librettists or whatever that may be, artists that look like me or come from my lens, but that would really be the most thing is representation.
I think it's important to have more role models, right, that actually look like us, folks with disabilities and the intersection that comes with that. And I noticed that there might not be enough representation out there in media and movies because nobody gives these people these opportunities to be role models. So I think it's nice we have a school, art institute, museums, etc. We could all partner together and perhaps hire people who are artists with disabilities that can actually teach others art and just be there in that role while also having disabilities. So it could also be like dancing for classes for folks who use wheelchairs, right? Something like that, right? You know, instead of saying that people can't dance because they use canes, because they use walkers, because they use wheelchairs, we can just create these spaces and have these role models for these kids. So I think it's important, again, early exposure, positive role models, etc. I think it's going to be much more acceptable that way instead of putting folks in the corners and isolate them. And I think it's important, the more exposure we have, the more we see them thinking, oh, right, I do remember I saw that dancer in a wheelchair, that's cool, we should have them come and teach again, or I'd love to collaborate with them later. Maybe they could become a leader for this other project I'm working on. Instead of, you know, other folks with disabilities, they could be our future leaders as well in the arts communities.
So I think about this question a lot because I'm a mom of 2 deaf children. Both my kids have cochlear implants. And when I was growing up, cochlear implants were not common. And I grew up with hearing aids and have very much less access to sound than my kids have. So I was lucky though, I had a mother and a father who advocated for me. And so I'm fortunate in that way. And I think advocacy is a really important thing to consider. 1 in 5 Americans has a disability, so anything you can do to advocate for a friend or a family member or anyone you know who has a disability can go a long way. And so I spend a lot of my time advocating for my kids, for their education, for their success in life. And they hear way better than me. They can overhear, they can talk about me behind my back. Had nothing to do with the deafness, it had to do with being teenagers. But they, my daughter is an accomplished pianist, and she's profoundly deaf, wears 2 cochlear implants, she's competed internationally. So I feel that nothing can stop them, and I think that I was fortunate to have parents who believe that nothing could stop me, that I can do whatever I wanted. So I think that's very important as a child to have that message be sent to you. So we're starting to run out of time, and I think that, oh, no, I have one more question. You have one more.
This is for ChrisTiana, about the intersection of disability and justice and equity and inclusion of people with mental concerns or living with disease. For example, what about folks with bipolar disorder or living with other chronic conditions like Crohn's or recently diagnosed cancer diagnosis? How do these worlds fit in your vision of disability and arts justice?
Well, the vision, I would hope that the arts vision would also include these folks in your arts vision as well. I think that one of the biggest things, not just as a consultant, but as a disability justice advocate, is that there's a whole world of disability that is happening at all times. And whether it's something that you are like us and you sit on panels and you talk about it, or it's something that you only deal with when it's time to take your medicine or it's time to see your doctor, or you get home and you start to take care of yourself after a long day, I think that's important. What I think to that question, what I can answer, and whoever it is, I would love to get coffee with you because I could talk your ear off about it, obviously. But I think what's important about it is not only to include it, but to find, I think, and we might differ, people might differ, but I do agree with part of cultural humility and working towards self-evaluation is proximity. And so doing it in a tactful way of finding ways to be in community with folks who have these, who live with these different sort of experiences, so that you're not just getting one person to talk about it, because there is a whole other world that is hardly ever talked about. And then I know you're cutting me off, but I'll say this one last thing. When I was at Seattle, I think it's important. So when I was at Seattle University, Seattle Opera, they asked me to be the social impact consultant. One of the first questions they asked me, because AIDA was coming up, was, ChrisTiana, what does AIDA mean to the Black community? And I said, well, I can tell you what I think AIDA means to the Black community, and I can tell you what on the internet says, but you have to ask the Black community to figure out what AIDA means to the Black community, which is when we started having our Black Inclusion Forum. That's the same thing to this question. I could tell you what it feels like for me. I think that it should all be included, but if you don't know, as a collective, so you don't know, you're ask somebody, and that might mean affinity groups or focus groups or just your own self-education and awareness around it.
Thank you so much. So we have about 20 minutes left, and I just want to make sure that I give you enough time to have some food. We have some food out there. You must eat it all before you leave. And have a chance to network with some people, find somebody you don't know very well, find out what they're doing around accessibility in their organization, send you contact information. I want to give you a few resources that would be helpful. The Leadership Exchange in Arts and Disability Conference is this summer in August in Denver, and it's the closest it's ever been to Seattle. So I highly encourage you, if you're working on accessibility in your organization, to have let this be part of your professional development and have your organization send you to this conference. Because I would love to see people report back on what this conference has to offer. There's people from all over the U.S. who are working on accessibility, and lots of great information there. You go to the LEAD website, you will find resources there, tip sheets, books, videos, and webinars. The National Endowment of the Arts has an accessibility page, so take a look at that. Again, I'm going to send this PowerPoint out, so no need to write everything down. And I want to say a huge thank you to the volunteers who have put this off. And you know who you are, there's too many to name, but thank you so much for your help, for helping me with this. And I want to give you a few minutes to, of course, the biggest thank you goes to my panelists, of course, for your time. Some personal information about yourself that I think is really, really helpful to all of us. And you have an opportunity to tell us, to give us feedback. So if you go to this survey right now, you can fill it out. It's 10 questions, very easy to fill out. It's also going to be emailed to you. So any feedback you get would be really appreciated, particularly for kinds of workshops you would like to see in the future. We can have a workshop entirely devoted to equity and intersectionality and disability, which I think was a very common theme today. So make sure you sign in with your email address, because I know there was some walk-ins and I don't have everyone's email address. I also want to leave you with our contact information. So we'll leave this up here on the screen, and want to be very sensitive to your time because you are busy people. And so without further ado, I'm going to close this. And thank you all for coming. And we will be here for a few minutes to chat afterwards. Thank you.